Welcome to Around the Girdle Earth, the podcast where Dartmouth stories come to life. I'm your host, Yovany Jerez, class of '03. And on each episode, we sit down with members of the Dartmouth alumni community to explore the moments, the memories, and the mentors that shaped them from the green to the great unknown. So, whether you graduated last year or a few decades ago, these conversations offer a window into the journeys we have taken and the common threads that connect us all. So grab your favorite drink, step into the story, cue up the nostalgia, and let's wonder together. Today, my very special guest is Melissa Llarena. She's a Tucky, class of 2010. Melissa, welcome to this video podcast. We're glad to have you here and learn more about your story. Why don't you kick us off with a little bit of your cultural background and your family background?
Perfect. Giovanni, thank you so much for this. Hello, the entire Dartmouth family out there, wherever you are in the world. So, where did I come from? What is my origin story? I would say it began as a daughter to two New Yorkers. So, this is the whole thing, right? My parents were born in New York, as was I, and my grandparents. That's where my Latinidad comes from, on my mother's side from Puerto Rico and on my dad's side from Cuba. And so for me, ironically enough, I didn't even gain much awareness in terms of being Latina until I went to NYU as an undergrad. And so, just for context, I'm NYU class of 2001. And that was where I started to understand a little bit more about my cultural history, being kind of either second generation or third generation at this stage. But I did learn and have the privilege of learning Spanish because, of course, neither abuelita would let me speak to them in English in any way, shape, or form, but they understood everything in English, especially gossip and things that they were not supposed to understand. So I had an amazing childhood in New York, but it was light years of a difference from Dartmouth and the trees and all of the beautiful greenery that I was surrounded by. Astoria, Queens is very much the concrete jungle, as was NYU. And so it was definitely a change in pace.
I'm wondering if we could reflect a little bit more on that family background because New York is a pretty diverse city, right? Very, very cosmopolitan, very metro. There's a lot of diversity there. So I find your comment interesting that your Latinidad didn't flourish until you went into your undergrad. Obviously, you grew up with your abuelos, your abuelitas, and the Spanish, but it's like you were sort of you saw it as a second nature sort of a thing. What was the matrix of your family?
So I would say, I was raised by a single mom, right? And so my mom spoke to me in English. So I would be shipped away to Miami because I wasn't going to Cuba, be with my Cuban grandmother for a month every summer until I was 16. And I said, no more. And I was shipped away to Puerto Rico for the second summer month to be with that grandmother. And so that's kind of where I just kind of embraced whatever was around me. Like if the kids were speaking Spanish from a Puerto Rico side, that was it. I would just, have to really like double down on, okay, we're going here and there and playing this and that. And I am now speaking in Spanish. But I never like thought about being Puerto Rican, Latina. It wasn't a thing for me because I was raised in Astoria. So despite Queens in general being super diverse, and despite being babysat by a lot of Colombian babysitters, funny enough, sometimes we would have pizza for lunch on Wednesdays, or we would have samosas on our way from, point A to Z. So I was really just like a human being surrounded by people that had completely different cultural identities. And I went to school with a lot of individuals who were Italian, who were Greek, who were from, and I hope I get this right, either like from Croatia, Bosnia, because obviously there was a war and changes in terms of the geography. So for me, I just never thought about it that way. Also because I was raised by a single mom. And for me, life was very, very challenging, and we had very humble beginnings. And so education was the way out. And the discussion of who you are and what you can and can't do wasn't even a topic. It was like, let's make sure Con Edison is on and we have electricity, right? Or let's make sure that, someone's going to pick you up after school. It wasn't so much like, let's talk about, being Puerto Rican or Cuban. It was really just survival, to be honest.
I love that reflection because I think there's a lot of truth there, right? Like even the ability to be introspective and to ponder upon identity is a privilege. You're right.
Yeah,
It is
my
an
mom
absolute
had
privilege.
my mom had no time for that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when you're in survival mode, it's like your priorities are completely different, right? But then you enter college, which is a privilege, right? No matter
Mhm.
which college you end up going to, and there's space all of a sudden to explore, right? There's time beyond the day-to-day survival to explore and be like, oh, my grandparents are from here, my parents are from here. What's up with that? Why is that different? I always tell people I learned how to be Cuban outside of Cuba, right? And I learned how to be American when I was in Europe, right?
I get it.
So it sounds like you could empathize with that.
100%. And I chose NYU for my undergrad more because of the proximity and the opportunity. I was blessed with a full scholarship. So Chase Manhattan Bank at the time decided to invest in me because I went for that scholarship and I was able to work and attend NYU at the same time. And so given that opportunity, I also had the luxury of joining extracurricular activities, which is where, again, I was like, oh, wait, I'm Latina. So I started hanging out with, funny enough, a roommate who was Puerto Rican and Cuban also, second generation too. And I also led, the Latino Heritage Month, and I got to do so many amazing things on campus. And so that was where, for me, I was like, oh, this is who I am. Oh, this is different. Oh, I have an accent. That's a funny thing. I still think to myself, I don't have an accent, but I know that I do. And so, it comes out and comes through.
I think if you have an accent, it will be a New York accent, right? Kind of
Mhm.
like, yeah, kind of like my Boston accent comes out every once in a while. But then I spent 12 years in Atlanta, so I actually, the Atlanta Southern accent also comes out. So it's a matter of the scenario, right? That's what comes out.
Yeah. I mean, I adapt too. My accent fluctuates. That is for sure.
What did you major in NYU?
So I majored in psychology. And so again, because I had the opportunity to be sponsored essentially by a corporation, my options were okay, it has to be like business adjacent. And so for me, I was like not going to take a stern business school class, like under no circumstance. So I decided psychology instead. And it was fascinating. It really was. And it was also a nice little window into mental health in general, because the other side note, which I actually wrote in my book about fertile imagination, is that my mom has bipolar. So, that experience, right, made the reality of like, oh, maybe I should learn about, mental health, psychology. And this was back in the day before it was so destigmatized, even though there's still stigma around that. And so for me, it was just driven by interest and the opportunity to study whatever I wanted because I was being sponsored by Chase Manhattan Bank. And so I'm very, very grateful to the whole thing, the whole opportunity.
Now I don't recall how big is NYU as a student body for an undergrad perspective. I'm wondering if you could comment on that, and also
Mhm.
obviously you're in the city. When does the campus start? When does the city start? Like, what was that experience for you?
I really love the fact that NYU was like my playground and New York City was my playground. Granted, like if I'm from there already, so it wasn't as like fancy schmancy like a Sex and the City experience. I wasn't going out to restaurants and all of that because you're a student and you don't have the money for that. Nor was I 21 early on either, right? things did change when I turned 21. But I would say that experience was amazing in that, there is no set wall or boundary for NYU, especially now it's expanded quite a bit. But I was right by Washington Square Park. And so that was really like the center of the campus. And I got to dorm as well, which was amazing to have my own side of the room. I know that sounds like, oh, didn't you maybe have your own room at home? But no, my bedroom was half the living room in terms of Astoria standards with my mom. So for me, it was like, wow, I get to like do something that's like typical I would see on TV, and like I'm able to enjoy the city on my terms. So I would procrastinate. I would walk down Broadway all the way to Canal Street. That was how I would procrastinate. If I was stressed out, I would grab coffee or whatever at a cafe. Maybe there was this restaurant called Taza de Oro. I think it was like Puerto Rican. It's closed since, but I would go there if I wanted some rice and beans. And the cafeteria people, we would chat in Spanish. So it felt cool. And at the same time, it felt like I had some distance, from like Astoria and Queens. And I also had the chance to do a lot of amazing things for the Latino Heritage Month that if I hadn't been in this city, maybe would not have been a possibility for me. So I got to invite Jose Feliciano to NYU's campus. I got to invite, this is going to sound so silly, but New York undercover actors to also come to NYU for Latino Heritage Month. So it's a function of being in the city, but the campus, and as far as students, body, I don't know if like in total 4 years or so, give or take, is like 30,000 people, or it's just like insane. It's like a little city in a big city, basically.
Yeah, it's a heck of a contrast, right? To Hanover, New Hampshire.
Huge.
So before we jump into that contrast, so you graduated in 2001 from NYU, and then you started Tuck 7 years later, 2008. What did you tell us a little bit about that professional journey, and then what motivated you to not only just go to an MBA, pursue an MBA, but let alone you landed on Dartmouth?
So for me, between leaving NYU and starting Dartmouth, there was a lot of exploration going on as far as like what I wanted to be when I grow up. And what I decided to do, although Chase Manhattan Bank paid for my undergraduate degree, they did not require me to work for them after I graduated. I know, right? They should have changed that rule, but that's okay. So I decided I wanted to work for Thomson Reuters. At the time, it was called Reuters. And that was amazing because I had to learn how to drive, buy a car, get into my first apartment in 30 days to start my job right after NYU. And then, of course, I was also outside of the city during that time. That was 9/11. So that was different because a lot of my career was working at Chase Manhattan Plaza downtown. So had I stayed working for Chase after those 4 years during that time frame, I may have been in the area. So I'm very grateful that I was in what I call random hop hog Long Island at Reuters during that major moment. Then after that, I was like, oh, you know what? Let me try law school. Right. So I was like, you study psychology undergrad, don't want to do a PhD. So the alternative is law school. So I had been studying for the LSAT like forever. I would say those 8 years, you would think I was trying to like master or reinvent the LSAT. Took the LSAT, applied to Fordham Law School, got in. I was in the first semester, but this time I was paying for it myself. And so it hits a little differently, right? And at that time, the first semester, I was just asking everyone around me, like, why are you in law school? Why are you in law school? I was really curious about that. And basically, people didn't have answers that were like, oh, I want to solve this particular, like, problem, or it's in my heart because I want to support whomever. Instead, it was like, well, I got in, I already paid for it. I'm like a second year, like, let me just finish this thing through. It didn't sound inspiring. So I quit. I quit law school.
Wow.
Yeah, which is pretty cool because I didn't have to pay the second semester, but I did have to pay the first, right?
Yeah, they don't forgive you on that.
No, they don't. So I paid the first, and then after that, again, exploration. So I interviewed maybe like 30 people, and I was like, oh, what do you do? Do you like it? What do you do? Do you like it? So I basically, just like the alchemist, you go back to where you came from. So I basically decided then that I wanted to try advertising, which, by the way, I had always wanted to do, except the compensation wasn't high enough, quote unquote, to support myself fully because I wasn't able to rely on anyone else. I didn't have necessarily a home to go back to per se. So I went and I was hitting the pavement of New York City, knocking on doors to try to get a job in advertising. Literally, not even like, oh, this isn't, my imagination. No, I literally was walking in Tribeca with heels, knocking on doors, and these were strangers, but no one worked from home, so people were there. Ultimately worked at Ogilvy and Mather. At Ogilvy and Mather, I got to be on the IBM account. And here's where the MBA idea came into my mind. So at Ogilvy and Mather, what I noticed was that the people who were making purchasing decisions from a client side had MBAs. So a lot of the IBMers had MBAs. And I said to myself, I was like, like, don't you want to be in like a position of power? Don't you want to be the one signing the checks, and so self said, yeah. So so I was there. I was in advertising, the best job ever, let me just say, because that exposed me to Latin America in general. Like I was talking to people in Brazil, talking to people in Argentina, talking to people in so many countries. And then I was like, I need to get an MBA. I didn't feel baked yet, like from an education perspective, which was important based on my roots and the opportunities that I didn't have as available to me. So then I was like, all right, great. I did the LSAT. Now let's do the GMAT. And so worked on that during after hours while I was at Ogilvy and Mather. And I decided that I wanted to compete a little bit with my husband. So here's how Dartmouth came to be as like a thought experiment. So my husband had pursued his MBA before me.
Okay.
And my husband was the one who said, oh, Dartmouth, Tuck. It was like number one, I believe, on a list in The Economist. And so my husband was like excited about it. I had never heard of it. And I'm looking at it through his lens. And so he pursued it, he went after it, but he didn't make it. He didn't make it into Tuck. He did make it into Columbia, their executive MBA program. And so he had to work and attend business school at the same time. That was the gig. But I, witnessing him working so hard and also going to school, I didn't want that. I wanted to go full time. And because I'm competitive and I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, I was like, and I want to go to Tuck now. Not even a joke. I wish it was, but I really was. So yeah, like I basically, had that insight from my husband, and I decided that I also didn't want to do what I did for law school, which was pay for it, right?
Yeah.
And again, I see this as like 107 blessings. I know this is a privilege and I know this is a blessing, but I did go through the consortium. And so the consortium, for anyone that's listening, please apply no matter what. Dartmouth is on that list and you are rewarded a grant, and it could be a partial, it could be full, towards one of X number of MBA programs. Dartmouth was at the time one of the top on that list of options. And so I went for it. And I went for it. I got in. I visited. I went to the Women in Business conference. And I remember when I first got to Hanover, I was not shell-shocked. I was concerned about the distance between the exits on the highway. I think it was like 91. I was like, wow, 10 miles. You better have your gas in check, right? That was concerning because I was like, okay, what's the next stop out of here? But The trees, like seeing the world's tallest trees, and me, I'm like 5 feet, was so cool. The air, it smelled like not bad air freshener you put in your car, but it had that pine or whatever.
Pristine. It's just pristine air. You're a New Yorker. You never felt pristine air. You're like, this is strange.
Was strange. So for me, I was like, "Oh, I like this place." I'm nervous about it. I was already married, so my perspective is a little different. So it wasn't just like me, there and doing the grad school thing, but it just felt like it felt great. It felt great. It felt way better than Fordham Law School during an era where people were ripping out from case study books because they wanted their peers to fail. Like Dartmouth felt different. It felt a lot more human. It felt a lot more like, okay, I would have support here. And I needed the support because I had never taken a business school class in my life at that point.
Wow, that's a powerful reflection. Did your husband go along with you, or did he work remotely?
So this is the funny part, right? So my husband basically at the time, he was part-time at his parents' house and part-time in Hanover. Like this is before remote work. So this was like an arrangement that he had to make with his employer. And as a husband and wife, we had to figure out for ourselves. And there's a lot of bravery in there because from a cultural perspective, like me being a Latina, him being a Latino, and our families just looking at us like we have 8 heads and we're crazy. Like you don't usually do that, quote unquote, like live, separately, nor wait, 6, 7, 8 years to have children from our family perspective. So we were really doing things quite differently.
So he are. I'm curious if he audited any of your classes. And like, hey, can I audit one of those classes with you? Any classes that are memorable for you from your talk experience, or any other special memories that comes to mind?
So my statistics class was
Ooh.
extra. I know, right? Not because of the numbers and the spreadsheets and the formulas, but the professor, Praveen Kapali. So he's still there and he still has a great sense of humor, and he really made the topic approachable, and he was just super witty. So one day I decided, and I don't know where this idea came from, but I decided that between me and a classmate, we would rewrite Jingle Bells, the tune to Jingle Bells. We would write a song using statistic terms. And as an entire class at the end of the school year, sing to Professor Kapali because he was so cool and we were so appreciative that he made statistics fun. I didn't say memorable because I don't get it still, but it was fun. And that to me was like such a highlight because I don't think I could have pulled that off like at a huge place. Like it was a place where we knew each other. I had the confidence to ask my peer, and I asked him because I was so scared to do it by myself. But at the same time, we also had the confidence to ask the whole class of grown adults to sing Jingle Bells, but using our words, which was statistic terms.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a good story. I wonder if obviously you have both networks, NYU and Tuck. Um, do you see a difference on the alumni network on the approach of it? Anything that stands out for you?
It's so interesting because I think, from a Tuck perspective, and we're speaking, and you went to Dartmouth, and my husband went to NYU, so it's kind of interesting in that way. But from a Tuck network perspective, there's this idea that 70% or more of us like contribute in terms of fundraising for Tuck and Dartmouth, right? And the reason I would say that number is so high is because we actually know one another. right? And I think that's a big difference. So I literally have stories about various Tuckies, and they have stories about me. We know each other's names, we know each other's, like, kids. I didn't have kids at the time. And we keep in touch. So I have a podcast, and I've invited some Tuckies on my podcast. I'm in this neighborhood here in Connecticut, and I'm meeting up, with a person I went to school with, who's in Greenwich. And it's like this very easy connect, let's chat kind of a thing. From an NYU perspective, to be honest, I think it's of an age thing. So, when I was super, super young, I was super open to meeting people and having friends. And so I still am connected to my NYU contacts, but it's because we were part of very like quaint sort of organizations. So is it lucha, is it Latino Heritage Month, right? But for Tuck, I literally performed in like the Bollywood group, in the Japan group, like literally every dance thing they had at Tuck, I was like the first one to participate. And so like I was able to really like talk to so many people with totally different life experiences at Tuck and still reach out to them today.
Yeah, you keep working back in this concept of felt more human, right? There's more personality in it, and I think your comments truly resonate with me as well in my experience, because I mean that's kind of like how you and I even met, right? It's like uh, mutual friends and also a LinkedIn connection, and those are the only people that I accept in LinkedIn without having met first. It's like part of the Dartmouth ecosystem, right? If you have that, then I'm good with it. Like let's connect. And whether it's been current students, recent grads, or part of the older generation, we're getting there as well. uh, you know, everybody's open. Everybody's open to, you know, bringing, swinging those gates open and like, hey, how can I be helpful? What do you, what, how can, can I make an introduction? Can I tell you about my experience? Um, so talking about that, I would typically ask you if you had a 20-minute TED talk, what would that be on? It sounds to me like, you written a book. I know you're doing a lot of podcasting today. Would your TED talk be around that, or what would be the theme?
You know what? I think for me, what resonates most is motherhood right now. So I have three little boys, and I will say that it's about the significance of being a mom, being as valuable as being the CEO of an organization. And I think that is something that would be amazing to see, like honored in the entire world. Because yeah, that's what my TED talk would be like. If I had to like just wing it and just be like, all right, I think I need to say this right now, that's what I would need to say.
What a refreshing idea. I mean, it's my wife would echo those sentiments, right? And I could tell you that being a stay-at-home mom is a hard job. You are the CEO of the family. I mean, like
Woo.
the
Yeah.
complexity of, especially if you have three boys.
Hmm.
We had three boys. I recently lost my middle child, and yeah, boys are very active, man. They keep you busy in the house. So my wife would certainly empathize and appreciate that comment. I wonder how your definition of éxito, success, has changed, right? Given your background, single family, your evolution, you went to these prestigious schools in NYU or Dartmouth, you had this, you know, professional career, and now you're very entrepreneurial yourself. I'm curious how your definition of éxito has changed.
I think early on, so at Tuck, like it was very, very narrow. So my definition was like, okay, land an opportunity that is, six figures and get to that place that I've always wanted to get to. And now I would say it's really like, okay, can I get through today with my children, in particular my 14-year-old, in a way that we're all like good and right with one another. Because from a psychological challenge, it's just like on another level. So for me, it's really family. So it could have been like, finances before, or some sort of version of freedom. And now it's really like family. Like if I get that right, then it's like, okay, thank God, I got that right. But that's what's important to me now. And like, why did I do everything else? Like for family, like hello.
That's interesting. That's a fantastic reflection. Now uh, today you do a lot of career coaching and mentoring, and heck, it seems like you went back to NYU to be an adjunct professor and do career coaching there. Tell us a little bit about that experience and what you do today.
So when I left Tuck, this was funny because I remember having lunch with a classmate of mine, and I was like, everybody else is like, oh, I want to go into consulting, or I want to do this other thing. Granted, it was the financial crisis era, so investment bankers were kind of like doing other things too. But at the time, I knew I wanted to be a coach. Ironically, and my thinking was, okay, my classmates will be my clients. Like that's how I just saw it. And so what I noticed was that a lot of us have these paths that have been put up by other people, basically, right? And I actually resonate with the Robert Frost poem, which is about, different roads and traveling down the one that, maybe had not been as traveled, and that making all the difference. And so for me, I would say, my coaching practice, the reason why I even opened up the doors was because I became a mom. And I also, to be very transparent, I was able to, because of the grants, the scholarships, and the hard work, I was able to make that choice to then be with my kids. But I also was really bored. So when my firstborn was 6 months, I opened up my LLC. And this was in 2011. Coaching now, it's like everyone's a coach. But back then, I had to explain what it was. And then I had to come up with my own approach. And what I've learned through these years in terms of coaching executives is that a lot of executives have these like secret wishes, things they wish they were, things that would be totally unexpected because they went to these fancy schmancy schools and they would never do, but they've always wanted to do, right? And I feel like that bravery in being able to actually execute on your real dream. And when I say real, I actually mean it. I don't mean like the one we've rationalized. Um, that bravery, I think, is what, for me has been encouraging and has inspired me to write my book, do a podcast, really talk to people that are doing things very differently. And not all of them, if we're being honest, went to fancy schmancy schools. A lot of them are just very bold and action oriented. And I think that's something we have to be mindful of. If a lot of us did go to these, very sophisticated programs that have frameworks and all these things.
I can see you being a very effective coach because you yourself are very introspective, and you need to ask the questions that trigger that level of introspection in another human being, which is kind of funky because it ties back to that psychology degree that you had as an undergrad, right?
Hmm.
That must have been very serendipitous in many ways. Melly, as we wrap up our dialogue here, you have any final words of wisdom or introspections you want to share, maybe to that high school student that's thinking about considering, pursuing his academic endeavors, or a recent graduate or a senior executive? What are your thoughts?
So I think this applies whether you are early in your life or you are not as early in your life. I think this idea that you don't necessarily have it figured out, not even when you're 50, and you're definitely not going to have it figured out when you're 15. I think what's important is that you keep striving, keep making progress, right? Not getting stuck in the, oh, this has to be perfect, or this has to be totally aligned, or this has to be totally blessed by everyone in my family. Like, it's okay to chart your own path forward with bravery and intention, but also just acknowledge like that little fear doesn't necessarily go away. But guess what? You have to just have a way to keep moving forward. It's almost part of why I became a meditation practitioner. I wanted to just breathe through the stresses and the anxiety of like talking to strangers or making the ask, etc. So yeah, insecurity is a thing, and we don't all have it figured out, but a lot of us are really good at pretending we do.
Yeah, I to add to that reflection, right? Sometimes, we get caught up in this pressure of like you have to pursue your passion. And I think about it, I'm like, well, my passions have changed with time and at different
100%.
stages of my life. I really don't know if that should be the priority, right? To follow my feelings and passions, like the whirlwinds and tornadoes that sometimes they are. I think it's more rewarding and more important to pursue opportunities, right? Opportunities that people offer or come your way or cross your path, and then be passionate about those opportunities in there. That I think it's a whole different framework in which to be very mindful about as you reflect upon it. That's what I'm hearing from your advice.
Absolutely. And when I was thinking about like the spirit of Dartmouth, or like what is that word, openness also comes to mind. So human and open. So there's something about that that makes us more available to things that might be unexpected, but quite interesting if you just follow down the path, you know? And I invite people to do that. And I actually don't care how old you are, and set in your ways. Be open to doing something that might be a little different, you know? It starts with crossing the street and walking on the other side, for example. Super simple way to kind of like change your perspective.
On that note, that's a fantastic ending to our conversation. For all of you that were able to join us online, thank you for being part of this episode of Around the Girdle Earth. If you found today's conversation insightful and that it sparked a memory or maybe gave you something to think about and reflect upon, leave us a thoughtful comment. And more importantly, share this episode with a classmate or another fellow alum or somebody who needs to hear this message. I think it's a very easy way of keeping the Dartmouth spirit alive. Sharing is caring, after all. Until next time, stay curious, stay green, and keep roaming this beautiful girdle earth we call home. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.